Hello, everyone. This is anti-Meister, the BitcoinMeister, the Disrupt Meister. Welcome to This Week in Bitcoin, Super Spreading Bitcoin 2022. Today is January the 14th of 2022. Strong hand. Buying over crying. Be a unique beast. Fitting in is overrated. Personal responsibility is the new counterculture. Buy and hold. Bitcoin is the next Bitcoin in motion. I'm offended by selling. Compete, don't complain. Conviction. Defiance over compliance. Oh yeah, that was a lot. But we got you the best guest in the space. We're here every Friday. And Zack Voell makes his return. Oh, I've been looking forward to this for a while. Brekkie is back in the house. And Bitcoin Mechanic. This dude is a legend. He's making his the first appearance on the show. But he's great and it's going to be awesome. Hello, my elite friends. Thanks for all the support. Hey, check out the links below. Pound that like button. Let's start this off by telling you that, remember, I am pumped because the Miami Bitcoin Conference, Bitcoin 2022, that's coming up on April the 6th and 9th in Miami. We're already in the year 2022. Use the link below to get a discount to get in. Prices are only going up. You can use the Adam10 discount code. It's all mentioned below. I'm very excited about the event. And I mean, JP Sears is going to be there. We're going to be able to meet JP Sears in person. That's pretty cool. I'm not usually, I've met a lot of cool people, but I'm excited about that. I'll be able to touch his long red hair and laugh at his funny comedy. That's pretty amazing. He's going to be there. All right. So we're pumped about Miami. We'll ask all three of these guys if they're going to be there. I mean, Brekkie and Zack, I was hanging out with them in Miami the last year. We had a blast down there. All right, but let's get into the news of the week, all right, and the articles of the week, the things that I thought were we should talk about. We'll start with Bitcoin Mechanic is going to talk about this article from Bitcoin Magazine. Bitcoin is not democratic, part 1. Problems with democracy. It's by Alex Vetsky. As the concept of democracy regresses before our eyes, Bitcoin presents a new way of ordering society and incentivizing progress. All right, so at the very least, I think we could say that democracy and Bitcoin kind of clash if you actually know what democracy is. But let's get into this, man. Is this just a clickbait headline, Bitcoin Mechanic, or what's up with Bitcoin and democracy?
Well, I mean, I like Svetsky, a good friend of his. I think he's far too kind in his takedown of democracy. I think he's far too generous with it. I was tweeting out a tweet storm about how shitty democracy was yesterday, just anyway. And then this whole thing happened. And I was, whatever it is I said about it, I said it's always the elites telling you, oh, they're attacking us for our democracy. We need to protect our democracy. This is an assault on our democracy. It's never anyone else talking about it. It's always the people that benefit from it being a democracy, the people allegedly representing you. They're the ones that benefit from it. And it's never us. But some people actually have it filtered down into their subconscious and they believe, yeah, this is a thing I want. I want democracy. I want, if a bunch of people disagree with me, I want them to be able to force their will onto me. That would be just awesome if that would happen. That's a positive. I like it. And I think it's too, I don't know. I think it's too generous a stance to take that Svetsky takes, because it's worse than any of that. People will really, they genuinely will vote for their own enslavement every time. And if you don't want to get carried on, if you don't want to get dragged down and be in the vehicle when someone decides to steer it off a cliff, then you're best off fighting democracy at every turn of every step of the way. And people used to complain about republicanism versus democracy and talk about how there isn't really a meaningful difference and how they both reinforce one another. And I just don't think so. I think the founding fathers got it right. They understood that if you start something off with some principles, some immutable principles, meaning they cannot be changed, then that's a much better way to run things, because then it doesn't fall prey to demagoguery and the inevitability of democracy. This is the thing about democracy. It's not something to fight for and to cherish. It's an inevitability that you must prevent at all costs, because democracy is just people doing what they've been persuaded to do or to support by a charismatic leader, usually against their own interest, and something that is usually undesirable. And this is the thing. People talk about democracy in the current context. This is what kills me about Corona Nazism and all this bullshit we're living through right now, is that it's super democratic. People actually want this stuff. It's nothing. The fact that Justin Trudeau up in Canada, where I am, is acting the way he's acting and talking about unvaccinated people the way he's talking about them, that's nothing more than a reflection of the fact that that's what the majority of Canadians want. This is democracy, and I hate it because there's no freedom in it. Absolutely none.
Well, another word for democracy, or a term for democracy, is mob rule with a suit on. Now, how this pertains to Bitcoin? Let's try to tie it into Bitcoin here a little bit here. I mean, Bitcoin is the ultimate in private property, one could say. And in the democracy, the mob can vote to steal your private property. So this is a big difference between Bitcoin and democracy. But Bitcoin, no one can vote to take your Bitcoin. No one can take your freaking private property. So I don't know if you wanted to tie in before we move on to the other guests, the difference between Bitcoin and democracy that Alex, I guess, alludes to and talks about.
Bitcoin is more like a republic. It has some founding principles that cannot be changed, at least not easily. They still require some active form of maintenance. In Bitcoin, we can look at that as the final step of verification, the large network of nodes that need to be satisfied in order for the proof of work that miners do to be valid and to be worth anything. So the fact that mechanism is there and the self-reinforcing nature of it, the game theory that glues it all together, that means it's like American republicanism, which gave us the greatest country ever with the greatest set of values ever. But unfortunately, as now it's become clear, the Constitution is just a piece of paper. If you're not going to defend it, if you're not going to stand up for your freedoms, they will just go. So in Bitcoin, you have a far more robust mechanism of maintaining the founding principles of how the whole system came to be and how it should continue. And it's not just a hard money. It's like this. I know we all know Thomas Strollite, right? I guess Brekkie, you do because you're in Swan, right? And we were talking on Spaces about how Bitcoin it's the opposite of all other political ideologies. It doesn't work on paper, right? We still haven't technically solved the Byzantine generals problem. It's in theory, it's still not actually solved, but in practice, Bitcoin works. It's the opposite of all other political ideologies, where that wasn't real socialism, that wasn't real libertarianism. We need more capitalism, and the problems with capitalism is because we don't have enough capitalism. Everyone gets to say, it's not, you didn't try my ideology properly, but Bitcoin's the only one that works, like actually in practice. Even if you say, oh no, this is going to go wrong, that's going to go wrong, it doesn't. It keeps everyone honest. It works really well. You can't get rug pulled. And that was something we were talking about on Spaces with Toma. And I forget why I bring it up. I lost my train of thought, but it's such a reliable system in that sense. And it works on so many levels that, like we started saying, on our political orientation is Bitcoin. I'm a Bitcoiner. That's it. I don't care if I don't want to say I'm a socialist or a capitalist or a libertarian or any of these things, because they're all just only good in theory. None of them actually work or are achievable in practice. Bitcoin it's the perfect practical solution. So yeah, what did you say to sparkle that, Adam? You said something like, how does Bitcoin? What was your question again? Because I was going to round off there and I forgot how.
Bitcoin can't be. You covered it. You covered it. Mob rule, democracy's mob rule with a suit on, and that the mob could vote away your private property. But in Bitcoin, no one can vote away your private property. No one's taking your freaking Bitcoin. Bitcoin is like pure law, and in democracy, the law can be voted away, basically.
Yeah.
But let's go to Zach. Your take on the Svetsky article or Bitcoin and democracy.
Sorry, I was muted there.
Unmute.
There we go. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting question to think about. I don't think there's any one system of government that you can say perfectly like describes how Bitcoin's protocol functions and how the network operates. 1 second. But like democracy, so I agree, like our current system of government leaves a lot to be desired. I think that's a pretty uniformly felt sentiment across all types of parties and political affiliations, and even not just in the United States, maybe particularly not in the United States. But regarding or relating this back to Bitcoin, like there are some elements of democracy that Bitcoin adheres to and are quite useful in how the network operates, obviously. Like you can say democracy is mob rule, which maybe carries a bit of a negative connotation, but sort of neutrally phrasing it, it's just ruled by the majority. And majority rule is sort of how we secure the network and prove a valid chain of transactions. The example or the counterexample to this, obviously, is we all get worried if any one particular party were to gain a majority of hash rate, because then the security of the network would be compromised. And that's just basic neutral democratic principles at its core. Whatever the majority secures, that's the rule. And that's what we all agree to is valid. Now, in meat space, outside of protocols, when you're dealing with human democracy, obviously the majority rule can affect you in very negative ways if you disagree with the majority. And so that's sort of where the analogy to Bitcoin being democratic stops, because obviously a physical human majority rule can take things from you or kill you or whatever. But in Bitcoin, the sort of democratic principles sort of stop at whatever the majority agrees is the proper blockchain. That's the accurate true ledger. But there's like communistic principles involved in Bitcoin. There's different bits and pieces from multiple types of government. So I guess like just the headline here, Bitcoin is not democratic. Like yes and no. I mean, it just sort of depends on how you want to frame it. And I mean, I think there are, hints of democracy in how Bitcoin operates, and democratic governments definitely aren't the best system. But, the famous Winston Churchill quote, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. I mean, it's kind of like all governments are bad. So I think the sentiment among this type of Bitcoiner that would sympathize with what Svetsky wrote here is probably preferring, anarchy to any type of organized government. And that also has its pros and cons. There's no silver bullet for managing humans in governing them. There's pros and cons to every system of government, but I don't know exactly where I was going with that. I guess just to round it out, like there are hints of democracy in Bitcoin and in some like pretty prominent aspects of Bitcoin. But like, is everything about Bitcoin like into democracy? Like, obviously not. No, I don't think so. So yeah, that's all I have to say, I guess.
All right. Thank you, Zach. And remember, the article is linked to below. All three of these guys are linked to below. We'll be talking about Bitcoin mining real soon with Zach. That's one of the reasons I get him on the show. He's got insider information on that thing. Hey, people up in the chat. Look, Charlie Lee is in the freaking chat. Yeah, I know a lot of people. Charlie Lee's freaking brother was at the Miami Bitcoin conference last year. Will Charlie be at the Miami Bitcoin conference this year? Who knows? Charlie, remember, the last time he was on my show, we said when Bitcoin gets to the 6-digit realm, Charlie Lee will be a guest on this show again. So we're not there yet, but we're one day closer to a Bitcoin all-time high. Remember that, people. Remember that. All right, because it always returns to its all-time high. Brekkie, you're out in the West Coast. Tell us about democracy and Bitcoin and whatever.
Oh, you're breaking up there.
And the article, anything you want to say about what we've been talking about.
Sure. I thought the article was really interesting. And
it's a bad connection.
Can you hear me now? I thought the article was well written. I tend to agree with Svetsky's critiques of democracy. I don't think I dispute any of that. The things I take issue with really is like, and Svetsky's a friend, so I mean this in a nice way, but what's the point of this article? What are you trying? What is the call to action here? Bitcoin fixes everything, yes, and Bitcoin is a much better system. But I think Bitcoin Mechanic was touching on this, or maybe Zach, you both were, that it's kind of an implicit argument for anarchy and libertarianism in a way. And if that's the case, well, okay, how do we go from the current democratic system to whatever you're arguing for? And getting everyone to adopt Bitcoin, I think, is part of that. But that's not going to replace the government. It's not going to, the government's not going to go away because everyone adopts Bitcoin. So I don't know. I think it's a really interesting article and a really good way to kind of make people think about the problems and flaws of our current democratic system. But man, maybe this will come in part 2, so I won't judge it yet. But what's the argument here? Where do we go from this? What should the individuals be thinking about, or should they just be buying Bitcoin and somehow in the future all this democratic stuff will be fixed by Bitcoin, but we don't know how yet. So that's the question I put out to the universe right now. That's all I got.
Yeah, I think that would be what I would say is undeniably the focus of anyone that wants to get some bang for their buck in trying to be an egalitarian or trying to make the world a better place. It's basically just making technology that undermines the power of the state to the point where you don't have to try and forcibly overpower the government or convince people not to participate in it and defund it or something like that. You can just, like that, some sly roundabout way, take the money out of the control of the government. Like, I forget who I'm even quoting there, but we know, like, the guy who's like, we'll never have good money again until we, through some sly roundabout way, figure out a way. That's Hayek, I think. We're basically just, Hayek. We're basically just making technology that roots around the centralized monopoly on violence that is the tool of tyranny that allegedly comes from the masses, that is still not justified even if it does come from the masses. So I didn't want to say I'm an anarchist, because that's just another one of those isms that doesn't work in practice, that sounds good on paper. But again, I find Bitcoin to be a kind of practical anarchy that actually does work. Like, anarchy literally meaning without rulers, rather than lawlessness. It just means there is no one in charge of you, which is great. And that's and Bitcoin is the principle of rules, not rulers, which is fantastic. It's great to be ruled by. It's a game that there's nothing worse, in my opinion, than playing a game where someone can change the rules halfway through. That sucks. That was the whole Robin Hood fiasco, right? It's like, hey, we found a way to hack the system. Like, we're gonna buy this stock that people have overly shorted, and we're gonna win it. Oh, they just changed all the rules on us. Like, we're no longer allowed to buy this stock. We've been forced to sell it. Like, Bitcoin doesn't. It's like, play a game, guys. The rules will never change. So if you want to play a game and for it to be fair, then here's the game you can play. And it's worth approaching it with some discipline and some future orientation and some low time preference, because you've actually got a chance here. So, yeah, I think the call to action is what I'm doing. Like, I work for Start9. We run a node project. It's a whole Bitcoin stack on a Raspberry Pi, but it's everything else too. So it's the ability to host your own social network and your own chat using the Matrix instance and a Mastodon instance. So yeah, you have your own social network hosted yourself as well. BTC Pay server, so you don't need to rely on things like Square and things like everything. The idea is that every service we use in the digital realm is dependent on some small clique of people, because you're basically a child and you need someone else to host your services for you, and they can either allow you access or deny you access. And it doesn't matter if you're a sitting president, you can get cut off from your access to these services, right? And so the idea is you need to grow up and be an adult, and not your keys, not your coins, but there's everything else too, right? Not your social network, not your Mastodon instance, not your social network, not your data, not your file browser if you're using Google Cloud or iCloud or Google Drive or any of these things. None of it's yours, right? You're not taking responsibility for any of it, so you're just totally dependent. You're like a kid asking his mom, "Can you drive me to the store?" And if she says no, you can't go because you don't have a car yet. You're not independent. So I think once you go down that path and you get independence with your own digital services, then then but that's sort of the call to arms. It's just like, ignore it. Don't vote for other people. Don't do this stuff. Just build tech that makes the state irrelevant and redundant. And then by default, everyone is free and everyone has to grow up and become self-sovereign. I think that's the call to action there. That's at least the one I respond to. And I think it's the noble pursuit in the modern world.
Well said.
Well, I think that Alex might just be trying to protect Bitcoin from all the people that are going to say it should be more democratic. The people who want to change the rules, to cut them off at the pass before people bring up this as a FUD attack vector on Bitcoin, saying it's not democratic enough and it's destroying democracy. Maybe that's why he wrote the article there, I think. Or it's something you could take away from it. All right, let's move on to some other news from this week. And Congressman Tom Emmer out of Minnesota proposed a bill to seek the ban the Fed from issuing a digital currency to consumers. He doesn't want there to be a FedCoin. There's going to be a FedCoin eventually, but for consumers to have access to it. Now, I think that will happen one day. I guess it's a noble cause on the congressman's part, but I just wanted to see what the panel had to think about that news story. So, Zack Voell, we'll start with you. The FedCoin bill from Tom Emmer.
Yeah, definitely an interesting piece of news. Sorry, some background noise there. Not sure if that came through. I think it's interesting. The little summary here at the top of the piece says the bill was introduced basically to limit or to prevent a CBDC on grounds of like privacy risks. And, I'm all for privacy as well, but like what privacy is at risk here? We have none already. So what is he trying to protect? Would be my question to him, but still like bravo to his, initiative and thinking. I also agree with you though, Adam. I think it's, inevitable that there will be one of these. So this may be more of like a symbolic act instead of, something that he thinks will actually happen. But the U.S. Fed has made it very clear they're not really in a rush to sort of launch a CBDC. They know, technically, on balance, like China is far ahead of them in this sort of project, like launching a central bank digital currency. The Fed, has said multiple times, like we, plan to do something like this, but we're not in a rush. We want to do it right, whatever right, means. But I think, ultimately this, probably won't have that big of an effect, but still good on him. Big fan of everybody who wants to protect privacy. Just don't really think there's much left to protect at this point. So, yeah.
He's getting it on record that he was against it, I guess, just putting it out there.
Yeah.
There's no stopping it. And it will, it's going to be a social credit score. I mean, the thing is, let them compete. I say, let them have it. Let the fools buy into it. As long as we're not forced to be into it, it's, whatever. The 80% are going to do what they're going to do. It's going to be so convenient. As the other guests mentioned before, people are begging to be slaves this day in this day and age in terms of the virus. So they'll be begging to be financial slaves in terms of having a convenient account with the Fed where they can wire you your money to stay home easily. All right, but Brekkie, your take on this?
I don't think I have too much more to add. It's really nice to see that there's somebody in Congress who kind of gets it, even if what he's proposing is not going to happen. But I think that's one of the nicer things of this past year is that we've seen politicians who get Bitcoin, some who kind of get it, and others who actually really get it. But it's as broken as democracy is, it's better to have some people in who are participating who understand what we're fighting for than to not have them there.
All right, Mechanic,
Yeah.
What do you think about this?
Yeah, so I disagree with Brekkie there. Is specifically when it comes to Bitcoin, I particularly like having antagonistic political environment for Bitcoin to exist in. I don't like it when people like Cynthia Lummis come along and try to make things easier on Bitcoiners because it weakens the system. I think it's an inherent trait of anti-fragility that it's not just that well, the main thing is that Bitcoin thrives in an adversarial environment. It doesn't just survive them, it actually does better. The weakest thing about Bitcoin, I think, at the moment is massive amounts of third-party custodians, which is everyone keeping Bitcoin in things like GBTC and other things like mining pools getting incredibly big and wanting to regulate themselves with initiatives like Michael Saylor's the Mining Council, things like that. Those to me are very, very dangerous things to exist, and they can only exist in a favorable legislative environment. I'd much prefer it when governments go on the attack, on the overt attack, I should say, and make Bitcoin straight up illegal and force everyone to learn self-custody, force the price to go up, force everyone to run a full node. To me, that is literally the most helpful thing they can do to Bitcoin, even though it hurts and it is stressful in the short term when governments do go on the attack. So I'm not a big fan of when they're, when they're trying to help us out, and that's usually my take. And it's not shared by a lot of the community, but I find recently a lot of newer Bitcoiners actually really don't see it that way at all. They're freaking out and saying, "Call your senator," over and over again. A few months ago, like, you got to call your senator. We need this. We need that. And I'm like, if you think Bitcoin needs favorable legislation from the United States government, you should sell all of your Bitcoin immediately, because it was built deliberately to withstand things like that. And not only is it built to withstand it, it's built to thrive in those circumstances. So,
but it's not whether Bitcoin needs those things, because I agree with you. But that's the thing, is like, is the Mining Council going to kill Bitcoin? No. Is Cynthia Lummis' support going to kill Bitcoin? No. So why, if I had a preference, why would I want to live in a country where it's illegal than one where it is legal?
I think if it's illegal, we don't need to keep crying and telling everyone, you've got to run your own full node. You've got to learn self-custody, because they just do it by default. And the price shoots up as well. I think Nigeria was a good example of that.
You say they do it by default, but who is they? I think the they number... I know what you're saying, but what I'm saying is that I think the they number is much smaller in that case than it is now. I think if Bitcoin was illegal, you would have far fewer Bitcoiners. And to me, true. It's more important that, we get 10 million Bitcoiners in the US than, yes, Bitcoin would survive and thrive with 5,000 hardcore node running Bitcoiners if it was illegal. But, I want my family, my friends, I want as many people as I know and love and care about to benefit from Bitcoin. And if it was illegal, they wouldn't touch it. So I see your point, but I push back.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because it's not black and white. I do, like, part of me would love if there were only 5,000 Bitcoiners, and then it comes down to the last true Scotsman fallacy, right? Like, I'd argue that that's all the Bitcoiners there are. If everyone else just has a bunch of GBTC in their retirement account, I would argue straight up, you're not even a Bitcoiner. Like, and they think they are. And I'm like, that does more harm than if they just weren't in the first place. But how do you quantify whether that's actually more harmful? Like, I don't know. Like, it's definitely debatable, but it's more, I don't want to straw man it, but literally the perspective is out there that, like, we have to have positive treatment from the US government. Otherwise, Bitcoin's fucked. Oh, sorry, I'm not supposed to. I'm supposed to keep this family friendly, but that notion is out there. I'm like, no, that's mistaken.
I agree that that's wrong.
And that's an altcoin. It's an altcoin perspective as well, because they're like, we cannot be declared a security because we're screwed if we're declared. I'm like, well, Bitcoiners don't care, right? The SEC could come out and say Bitcoin is a security. Like, it's not going to affect anything about, at least the way I use Bitcoin. But you made another point as well in your first response, which I just wanted to amplify, because I totally agreed with it, but I can't remember what it was. Oh, that's it. You both basically agreed on that one, on what you said, which was CBDCs just... In my basic take on them is just they don't do anything that isn't already being done. So your point that privacy is, what more have we got to lose when it comes to privacy? There's hardly any left anyway. Well, there is a bit left, and it's cash. And to me, I've always seen CBDCs as like a hard fork in government money to clear up a bit of technical debt, which is people still have cash. And like as much as we can try and not increase the maximum denomination and inflate the cost of everything to the point where you can do less and less and less with cash. And in countries like where I'm from, in the UK, we'll change bills every few years as well. So if you have a whole bunch of £50 notes, in a couple of years, you'll need to take them into a bank because they're going to go out of circulation. So they don't tend to do that with the US dollar. So you could have you could Pablo Escobar it and bury millions of dollars and come back to it 20 years later and it's still actually in circulation, but not in Europe as far as I can see. And cash has a lot of burdens. You can't back it up, And I think what will happen with CBDCs is it will be a continuation of exactly what we have, but just starting from a place of surveillance. So it will be worse in every regard, but it will be philosophically identical. They may even issue some sort of cash version of a CBDC where you can get like a voucher or something and it's tradable and it's kind of like a bearer asset. But I think so in a practical sense, we end up exactly where we started. So I don't think they're any threat to Bitcoin. Like a lot of people are quite concerned about the existence of them. I think if they were a threat to Bitcoin, then Bitcoin wouldn't be able to exist in the current environment, and it can exist in the current environment. So I'm not worried.
Yeah. I think that's a good point about cash. That probably is, the one bit of privacy left in the vestige of the fiat money system, and CBDCs was definitely hurt that. I did want to go back to something you said though about adverse environments for Bitcoin. So I agree with you in part, but I'm not so keen on inviting adversity into Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin does thrive in adverse environments. The way I sort of view, politicians like this who take friendly stances toward Bitcoin is, I think, a similar view that both of you have expressed, although maybe with slightly different perspectives. I see it, as probably categorically a good thing, but I really don't think it's as big of news as, people often make it out to be, because I think it's great. You're on our team now, you believe or want to support the things I support. That's cool. But if you decide to leave the team, I don't care either. It's it's cool you're on our team, but I also don't really care if you change your mind and, change views. So I think it's not a bad thing. Although, your point of anti-fragility and, we don't, obviously, whatever that cycle is, hard times make hard men make easy times, all that. You don't want that to, sort of happen with Bitcoin where everybody supports it. But also at the same time, the goal of Bitcoin is to win. And after you win, who's left to challenge you? So it's sort of inevitable that, if this all plays out the way we think it will, everyone will sort of be on board in some capacity, and everyone who opposes it will, by definition of winning, they'll be defeated. So the adverse environment, I think it has an expiration date is basically what I'm saying. And in the process of getting there, whoever decides they're friends of ours and want to support the same thing we support, that's great. But we don't need them if they change their mind.
I agree.
There's no reason to antagonize them, I guess, is my thing, which I see. I don't know. The reason I wanted to say this is because you made a comment about trends you see in newer groups of Bitcoiners, which I agree with. I think it's very strange to me. I was having a conversation with a Bitcoiner that I actually used to work with, and she said, yeah, a lot of new Bitcoiners seem to be very pro KYC, anti strict privacy. And I guess I'm not really in those circles. I just sort of have my generation of Bitcoiners that I sort of was introduced to, but it's very sad if that's true. And I think, every group of people has their own sort of flavor of how they approach Bitcoin, whether, it's full stack, self-hosted tech all the way, or, your casual GPTC investor. But I definitely think, some of these things basic privacy and self-sovereignty is a key tenet of, the most basic level of believing in what Bitcoin stands for, regardless of whether you're a communist or anarchist or pro-democracy believer. So I hope that's not the case. Kind of sad if it is, but politics, I think, is just sort of a sideshow for this whole thing. No reason to antagonize them. If they support what we're doing, that's awesome. Makes it a little bit easier for us. But I think the end game is it becomes easy, completely easy eventually, because we'll win. And at that point, there's no adversity left.
Zach,
so I hope that makes sense.
We've already won, Zach. Okay. We've already won. I just want to make that clear. Just
I believe we've already won too. I think 2017 that was the most scary time in Bitcoin's history, in my opinion, and we absolutely, it was stronger than I had faith in it being. And since 2017, since surviving all that block war bullshit, I was really happy how that whole thing came out. And I'm like, if we can survive that, we can survive anything, because everything else is external. I do have these occasional worries about a miner activated soft fork that's somehow coercive and tries to limit transactions or tries to adhere to like energy use requirements or like greenwashing, something like that. Some things like that do worry me, and they do become more possible as a result of initiatives like the Mining Council. And that's why I would sort of, be scared, but also breathe a sigh of relief if they said no one's allowed to mine Bitcoin anymore. So all the big pools in America shut down. And like, I want to ask you guys, when China kicked out all the Bitcoin miners, how do you see that as a good thing, a bad thing? How do you, because that sort of exemplifies my perspective here. Like, the price tanked when they kicked miners out, and I was like, this is great news. So do you know what I mean? Like, this is where I'm like, God, I'm just not on the same page as so many Bitcoiners here. So what do you think about that? Yeah,
I agree with you 100%. I think it's a great development. And I think I agree with you in the fact that I don't think there's any way to frame that as long-term bad development for Bitcoin. I think maybe, I don't want to misrepresent your ideas, but I would agree with you if you're sort of saying like all of these stress tests for Bitcoin are key to prove the network, rather than like we want to live in a 24/7 adverse environment forever for Bitcoin, which I don't necessarily agree with. But I think the big block war, the China ban, like the final China ban, all of those are key stress tests for different vectors of the network, all of which ultimately produce very good, healthy, long-term results, even if there's like short-term turbulence around them. But yeah, like the China ban was phenomenal for the health of the network. Like, it really sucks because there are a lot of miners still hurting from it. And there's a small subset of miners that I really feel for, because they left China, migrated to Kazakhstan. Now Kazakhstan's screwing over miners again, and they're having to relocate a third time, or I guess a second time, to a third location. And it's rough for a lot of miners out there still. But, hash rate is back at all-time highs again. Like, the security of the network recovered like in spades, even though all the miners who were displaced haven't, fully recovered themselves yet. We feel for them. But it's great stress test. The network obviously passed with flying colors, and there will be, I think our biggest battles are definitely ahead of us. So I agree with you guys. We have won, but I still don't think the biggest battles are behind us for the network. And some of them will be technical, some of them will be like political, but we'll get through them. It'll, just the pattern is the same: stress test, short-term turbulence, long-term success. And that just happens over and over again in different ways. But yeah, the China thing was great for the network overall.
What's your perspective on it, Brekkie?
I mean, Zach just speaks for me. He's a brilliant guy. I don't have much. I mean, yes, like everyone was worried for like, a few minutes. I think I wasn't worried. Like, it's one of those things when you've been around Bitcoin like long enough, you realize it bounces back. So long term, good. That's all I got. I don't know.
And if you're a miner, man, like, it just meant you got almost twice the sats for your electricity. Like, it was incredible. Like,
what's interesting now also is I feel like we're seeing a resurgence. It's just starting, I think, but a resurgence in interest in home mining and individuals mining their own Bitcoin. And that's really really exciting to see. I don't know what'll happen. Like, like I live in California, where electricity costs are just, even if I wanted to do it just for KYC free Bitcoin, it's like it's cost prohibitive, right? But
what do you pay per kilowatt hour?
It's about, I think it's between 20 and 22 cents.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
I did want to jump in there with the mining thing though, because Bitcoin Mechanic mentioned a lot of things that I'm also concerned about, or that I think would be bad, but I'm not necessarily concerned about. And I wanted to sort of explain why, with a lot of the environmental narratives and pushes and initiatives in mining. Looping this back to what we were talking about earlier about democratic principles, I think like this is where Bitcoin's elements of democracy shine, right? Because there will never, like, we've seen this before with marathons, like what was it, FSAC
OPEC.
or OPEC, yeah, whatever pool they were trying to censor transactions for in compliance. Obviously, miserably failed because they seem to not really understand how transactions work in the network. But there are other initiatives like this too, like tokens on Bitcoin that would verify green mining, or exclusion from pools or transactions if you aren't a green miner or whatever. But the democracy part of Bitcoin is beautiful here because there will never be a majority of Bitcoin's hash rate that supports that. So if they want to support that, they can either miss out on solving blocks or go fork off and create their own network. But the majority of hash rate that secures and dictates what ledger is secure and who can participate, basically, will never support that. So if they want to make such a fundamental change in the rules that applies to everyone, basically, like you have to be a green miner if you want to participate on the equal playing field with everyone else, that won't happen. So I think failed experiments like Marathon's censored pool are very key sort of case studies that other miners who want to implement stuff like this should observe. But also, like, the beautiful thing is you can do whatever you want. You just can't necessarily force it on someone else. So if there is a miner who wants to prove like we are 100% solar powered, like that's great. You can do that, but there will never be a future where they can enforce that on everyone else in the network. And that's key. So
I don't know if I'm as confident in that as you. I want to be, but the point is they don't need to be a they don't need to be a majority. They can be a minority. As we've seen, that's what 2017 really proved, is that a minority enforcing a new rule that doesn't break any of the old rules, i.e. a soft fork, can be only a couple of % of the total network hash rate, but they're an existential threat to everyone that ignores the new rule, because eventually you can wipe out the old chain just by if you ever get longer. If you start enforcing new rules, say, hey, we're only 1 or 2% of the network hash rate, like that's what did Mara Pool just buy? They bought something like $800 million worth of ASIC miners, and I did the calculations. I can't remember what it was, but that's a big amount of network hash rate to have. And if they say, okay, we're going OFAC compliant again, and we're going to do it to the point where we hope other pools just voluntarily jump on board. And, all the miners have been kicked out of China. So let's say we've got 15% of all network hash rate is in America now. And, a third of that, 5% of the network hash rate is enforcing some new external condition, right? So it's a little bit gray. This is the relief for me, is that whether you're green or not is not something the Bitcoin protocol understands, and you can't fork it in any way to understand that. But you can just say, as a pool, we mine allegedly green blocks, and we're not discriminating against blocks that don't do that, but we are going to start at this height, and we're going to crawl along at 5% of the speed of the other chain, but we will never get wiped out because we have a new rule. You don't, so you can carry on, and the nodes will only care about your long chain. But if enough of people start coming over to our chain, eventually we might get longer than yours. If we can get over 100% of what you have, then we will slowly catch up with you. And the minute we get longer than you, all the nodes will jump on our side, and then that's it. You're wiped out. Anyone that didn't go along with this coercive fork is now going to have all of their block rewards wiped out for maybe hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe tens of thousands of blocks. There'll be an existential threat, and we'd have to do a responsive soft fork or a hard fork of our own to reject their chain, which that sounds like an absolute nightmare scenario to me. And the only thing that makes me sort of relieved about it is that it's an external condition. It's there's nothing in Bitcoin that understands whether a block is green or not. So I think if that scenario did come, it would be the case that we have actually soft forked and we're only allowing green mined blocks into Bitcoin now. But guess what? Everyone's still burning hydrocarbons anyway. There's no way of enforcing the actual usage of energy in it. All those Russian blocks, like they're still, they're still carbon dirty or whatever. So I think ultimately it's a dead end as an attack. And like, it's just another thing to keep me up at night that Bitcoin will survive and just go, stop worrying so much.
So no, I agree 100% there. I just wanted to tie in back what I was saying before, the reason I'm not concerned. And I'll admit, I think what you're describing is like a feather fork attack on Bitcoin. And I'm not sort of read up on all of the game theory and technical hypotheticals of how all that plays out. But the key element here is that sort of side chain soft fork that would be like, green only will never reach the critical mass necessary to actually execute the attack you're describing, because basic profit says miners will stick where the most transactions are. By opting into that chain, you are willfully excluding yourself from over 90% of all of the rewards for participating in the activity of mining. And nobody would logically want to do that unless they're massively subsidized from some sort of external force throwing cash at them to throw away all that profit that they would otherwise receive from just mining normally like everybody else.
Yeah.
So in theory, it sounds, kind of scary, but actually played out in practice, no one sustainable, at least, is going to forfeit all of those profits to mine a small chain and get a fraction of the block rewards and like solved blocks just because all in the name of, being green.
I hope so.
And right there, the attack is dead in the water from basic like profit incentives in my mind.
I hope you're right. Like again, though, worst case scenario, and this is Bitcoin adversarial thinking. It's everyone's using Lightning. There's barely anything on chain. We've had enough halvings that there's just not enough to sustain miners. And governments come along and say, okay, we're going to subsidize you. We're going to treat you like Tesla. We're going to just give you endless handouts if you can mine blocks according to the rules we impose on you or that you voluntarily adhere to. Then you can make your money that way. And then once you introduce that, this was the original argument behind coins that went, we're going to do something useful with our proof of work. We're going to find prime numbers or whatever. Like it was like, no, you cannot have economic externalities. The miners must only be economically motivated by what happens inside the network. So governments, of course, can screw with the incentives by saying, hey, mine green blocks. We'll give you $2 million every time you find a block. Or like even just hash away and we'll pay you based on your hash rate. So like it's a worry. Like, and there's even talk from people like Peter Todd, like eventually we might need to introduce inflation into Bitcoin just to sustain miners. And it's like, well, it is just a theory, right? That Bitcoin, the 21, can you imagine that if we changed the 21 million limit just because it wasn't sustainable without that? Like no one thinks they want that, but it might be a thing that eventually people are like, yeah, miners are just not sustainable otherwise. Like the transaction fee thing didn't work out. The layer 2 solutions work too well, could end up being a thing like that. But, I would just say I keep an open mind to it rather than I don't try and be too ideological with that one or too sort of zealous with it. You made one other point I wanted to comment on there as well, but I forget what it is.
So Mechanic, I have a question for you then. You say this keeps you up at night a little bit, this using this example of, governments pressuring people to, green blocks and all that. What about using the system against itself? Like I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Like I am very disillusioned with our current democracy, but if there are politicians like the one who's, I forget his name, who just introduced that bill that's going to fail, but, cares about privacy. If there are politicians who get it and lobbying groups that get it or that can be convinced to get it, like what is the argument against trying to prevent these outcomes from happening, to educate the world about how dumb it is to try to mine a green block? It's weird. On one hand, like I'm on the side of Bitcoin is opting out and that the system is broken, but if there is a way to mitigate the damage by using the current system, I don't see that as such a bad thing. Even if it's a hopeless effort, like why not try?
Yeah, I would never say it was a good and bad thing, black or white, because there are going to be loads of advantages to it. Like there are people that are just patriotic Americans that are like, America needs to embrace Bitcoin for America's own good. And America's a great country and I don't want it to collapse under hyperinflation with no backup plan, while some other country like El Salvador, like, okay, that's a stretch, but that, overtakes and becomes a new dominant superpower just because it embraced it. I can understand that perspective completely. And it's a nuanced topic. Like there's loads of pros and cons to it. The only reason I take this sort of hardline position I do is because of the reaction to the China mining ban. I'm like, wow, most people think Bitcoin actually really, really needs like state support. And they're wrong, and they are in Bitcoin for the wrong reasons if they think that. So that's the reason I take that hardline stance, because I don't really see that many people taking it. And, this is cypherpunk technology. It's not crypto. Like we're in different worlds, right? So I agree with you, but I can't really say it's good or bad. I'm just saying, like, in principle, an anti-fragile thing should actually thrive in circumstances where it's attacked. Like an immune system sort of thing. Like, it's like, I remember Andreas making that analogy years ago with, like, do you overly shelter your children, cotton wool, like hand sanitizer everywhere? Like, that's bad for them in the long term. And if you let them run around and play in the dirt and all that stuff, they get stronger and tougher. And, it's an old analogy and it's well understood. And to take it back to democracy as well, like, there's one thing I was thinking of where you can have changes occur in a society or a system where it's just a very small intolerant minority, right? And that's very anti-democratic. And I think that would be and like wokeism, like, would be a great example of that, right? Like, because it's the majority of people don't care about all this, like, language policing and absurd behavioral things, but it just became a tiny intolerant minority that populated that just sort of overrun Silicon Valley and just dominated everything else, and like has managed to change to some extent the English language and all this stuff. And that's sort of an analogy for what I fear with soft forks, with coercive soft forks going on. It doesn't need to be a 51% attack. It can just be a tiny little amount, because as long as they introduce this new set of intolerant things or a new rule set that can exist in harmony with the old rule set without breaking them, changes can occur, even if it's only a small amount of people. So that isn't democratic, of course, but those kinds of changes are what make big changes in allegedly democratic societies.
All right. We've gone down the rabbit hole. I just want to say one thing. You've got the adversarial thinking going there. You take it to an extreme, and I just don't want everybody to worry. I always, because after shows like this, people start emailing me, oh wait, there's going to be a green mining takeover. No. He's just thinking long term. He's looking out for Bitcoin. It's about the adversarial thinking there. So good job, mechanic, looking out for Bitcoin's best interest and coming up with these scenarios that we don't hear about that often. I want to say that CS2 sent $5 in the super chat. We're $62 we need now to get another One Bitcoin show next week. Thank you, dude. He says government's main concern is not that criminals will use Bitcoin. It is that everyone else will use it. All right. That's some people in government. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the freaking what's her face from Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren. Her main concern is that not the criminals use Bitcoin, that everyone else will use it, and they won't be able to print as much money anymore and buy all the stuff she wants for the government. All right, so let's now that we're talking about mining here, we got into a mining discussion. I wanted Zach to give us an update on his mine. He works for a mining company, but real quick, cover the story this week. We were talking about solo mining. So a small operation mined a block, got a block reward. What was that? Two people
got very lucky.
Mined a Bitcoin block.
I got very lucky.
Nice one, Brekkie.
They were both me, actually. Yeah.
What was up with that, Zach?
It's been a big week for solo miners. Let me see who was tweeting about it. Khan Kalivas. Yeah. I don't know him too well, but he posted links to the two blocks. Like one solo miner solving a block on their own is, pretty lucky, but two in the same week is ridiculous. So some crazy luck streaks going on for a couple of these solo miners. One of them looks like he said was only running with 116 terahash, so maybe two old machines or like one almost latest gen. And then one of them had, I guess, only 126 terahash. So I don't know, like basically the idea of mining with pools is, the more hash rate you combine, the more hash rate you throw out the network, and the better your odds are of solving a block. And so you get paid out more regularly. For anyone listening who doesn't quite understand how this works, the only reason you would like solo mine is, if you don't really care about regular payouts, you kind of do it as a hobby or, to use some other byproduct from mining, like I guess heat being the only other one. And you just have machines running, don't really care about receiving the rewards regularly. But, sometimes like it's also often called like, excuse me, lottery mining, where you just mine and hope, that something like this happens to you every now and then, where, solving one of these blocks at like we're at like $45,000 worth of Bitcoin or 43, that probably pays for, at least a couple of years of mining expenses, and you can, keep running. But yeah, very rare, very unusual, and 2 in the same week is, kind of crazy. So it's been fun seeing these two miners solve these 2 blocks here.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Would you? I wouldn't recommend anyone get. I mean, it's luck, and
yeah.
Did anyone do the maths and see like how it compares to winning the lottery? Like they had around 120 terahash, right?
Hold on, I'll pull up the thread. John, I think, did the numbers yesterday. Okay.
All right. When you're doing the numbers there, I want to get Zach's opinion on what's it? Jack Dorsey is. We're officially building an open Bitcoin mining system. What's that about? Is Jack Dorsey saving the world here? What's going on?
Yeah, so I couldn't give you the exact date, but earlier or last year, I guess now technically, towards the second half of last year, Jack or Square or I guess some part of their like the Block corporate umbrella announced plans to build what I believe is like an open source ASIC, basically, where they open source plans for mining hardware. And, this just seems, another step in their process and plan to develop and release that, which is really cool. So designing ASICs and building and manufacturing ASICs and testing them is like very, very capital intensive. And not really sure when we'll actually see like a usable product from them or a reliable usable product from them. But it's, building it in the open is in line with the ethos of Bitcoin. And, if you're pretty much, you have micro BT and Bitmain ruling the market here for Bitcoin miners. So a third, and at that open source competitor introducing more hardware, different hardware into the market would be great. And also not to knock Canaan, but they've lost a good bit of market share there. So it'll be cool to see new hardware. It'll be cool to see open source hardware. And just the question is, when we'll see something reliable and usable. Like miners they want to buy stuff that they know and trust, and they don't really like have much patience for machines that go down a lot, which is why, like everyone, a lot of people used to love Avalon's, Canaan's models, and they had a lot of problems. And once you piss off miners, they have a hard time like gambling again, basically on, all right, let's buy their new generation, risk a lot of downtime, risk a lot of money that we'll never recoup. So definitely like some trust to win over, but I think it's a great initiative. Just, they have a lot of work ahead of them for sure. But they seem to be wanting to do the right thing, and that counts for a lot.
Could you comment on Blockstream's development as well?
Blockstream building the green mining farms, I guess.
Well, they're coming out with an ASIC as well too, right?
Oh yeah, they bought Spunduli's.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and I don't believe that's open source, but I think they face a similar thing. Like they're a similar situation. And I know of at least 2 other sort of stealth projects right now of people trying to build their own ASICs also for Bitcoin mining. So we're going to see a lot of new hardware coming into the market. But like, again, they have a lot to prove, and, miners aren't really prone to just like, they'll buy a couple machines, test them out. But they really need to be proven before, miners are going to go big on new hardware. So it'll be cool to see these different ASICs hitting the market from Square and Blockstream and a couple other projects that are still like in development. But yeah, they Bitmain and MicroBT have like almost a decade, well over a decade between the 2 of them of research and development on how to make the best ASICs for Bitcoin mining. And so it's cool to see all these new competitors coming into the field. Like, it's obviously a signal there's lots of profit that they're targeting, and the market is very healthy for mining. But they are new entrants, and the incumbents are very well capitalized, have a lot of research and development, have a very good product. So definitely have their work cut out for them for sure.
So I found the numbers. The chances of getting a solo block, you basically have a roughly 0.00006% chance of finding a block before somebody else is expected to find it. So that's these two guys got very, very lucky. Also, this is just low hanging fruit, and I don't know why we didn't do it sooner, but every ASIC should just be painted green. Seems obvious to me. We'd be green mining. Everyone would be green mining. It would just work perfectly. So I don't know why we don't do that. I think everyone should paint their ASICs green.
I will say I do love the Blockstream's name for their ASIC also. I think Adam tweeted it's like the Cyber Hornet or the Hornet or something. That's what they're going to call their model. So that's cool branding, and in crypto branding goes a long way. So
what happened with the Dragon Mint stuff? Did that work out?
I'm not really sure. I don't know too much about that.
Fair enough.
Well, I like seeing Jack competing and not complaining there. That's what it's all about here. Pound that like button, people. What do you guys think about the Bitcoin Legal Defense Fund of Jack Dorsey here? That news broke this week.
Bitcoin Mechanic doesn't like it.
Let's start. Yeah, that's because we were talking about government, protection from the government.
Yeah, I mean,
third parties. What's your take on it?
It's another mixed thing. I don't want to be too black and white about it. Of course, like the intention of it is flawless. Like I get we're under attack from this stupid asshole Craig Wright. Obvious, ridiculous fraud, like taking it to extents no one could ever possibly imagine a human could go and still remain out of jail. Like this amount of legal tomfoolery and bad acting. It's just insane. It's insane. I cannot believe this guy is still doing what he's doing. But well, he is bankrolled by Calvin, right? Who's billionaire. So that does go quite far in explaining that. So yeah, it sucks. But like I've had developers communicate to me personally that they are deliberately avoiding doing things that would unquestionably be good for Bitcoin because they don't want to get on his radar and be sued. And the idea that there is some money out there to support them in a scenario where they're facing litigation is definitely a weight off their mind, and it's a good thing. So obviously the intention of it's great. There's always that little like niggling worry in my mind, of course, with things like this where the source of the money is going to become a potential authority and something that can confine your choices and your actions when it comes to what you do as a developer. So nothing really beats anonymous development. And I do think that any Bitcoin developer that says, "Okay, guys, I've had fun. Thanks. I've been enjoying being a developer for Bitcoin for years. Bye. I'm going to do something else now," and just come back as an anonymous developer, and that's that. Like I would like to see all of the contributions on core releases being Santa Claus and the fairy, the tooth fairy and all this stuff. Like, I mean, we had the precedent, right? The Satoshi. There's a whole bunch of reasons Satoshi was anonymous. It's not just the reasons people think. Like, there's every reason to be an anonymous developer when it comes to Bitcoin. But I think I don't think my concern with the fund is going to end up being an issue. I do think if a Bitcoin developer ever becomes malicious and is a result of corrupt financial incentives from something like Jack Dorsey's thing that started off well-intentioned and turned bad, if all of those things came to pass, I still just think people would go, well, I'm not running Bitcoin Core anymore. I'm going to run Knots, or I'm going to run some other implementation. So again, Bitcoin would survive it. I think it's good. I can't help but see everything in this knee-jerk adversarial mindset because Bitcoin's too important to me. I have to care about every single little thing.
No, I agree with that 100%, and I do appreciate I think it's amazing also, and I haven't fully considered sort of the potential cons of how all this could play out. And I agree, wherever there's a lot of money concentrated, there the potential for power to follow with it. I think Jack's a very benevolent actor. There's always a risk, though, obviously, to consider. But also, like, my perspective is, if this isn't like what Bitcoin taking care of Bitcoin looks like, then what is? Like, you have a very wealthy Bitcoiner who's with no sort of force besides his own will, like throwing a lot of money to defend vulnerable people who are helping build the ecosystem. It doesn't have to be Jack; it could be an anonymous Bitcoin whale from 2010. I think that's great, and that's the picture perfect scenario of the network taking care of itself. Could, that entity with a lot of money maybe influence things? Sure. But I don't really, that's obviously like a possibility maybe, but I don't really see it as a high risk scenario. But yeah, I think it's great. I do want to say my battery just beeped at me, so it's running low. I might drop off the call here, run upstairs, and have to plug it in. But that's all I had to say about the Jack Dorsey thing.
Okay, Brekkie, Jack Dorsey.
You brought on too many good guests. They say everything that needs to be said. Yeah, he's a good guy, so we think. There's a risk. There's always a risk. I would like to see more people doing what he's doing. I think there are a lot of these. I know this is easy to say as not a whale and, not controlling tens of thousands of Bitcoin, but there's a lot of whales out there from the early days, and we need you. Come and do good things. Go put up billboards. I don't care. Like sponsor meetups, do whatever. But, there's a lot of Bitcoiners who are very wealthy who could be doing a lot of good, and maybe they are, and they're anonymous. I don't know about it, but
all right,
Bitcoin is for humanity, so help humanity.
Zach, I don't want your battery to run out or anything like that. You're a prominent guy on Twitter, Zach. I just want to get your take on Plan B. You're not Plan B's biggest fan, and the pedestaling of certain models. We say we shouldn't have heroes in Bitcoin, but you shouldn't have certain models that are your heroes either. So I don't know if you have anything to add to
BitcoinMeister,
that saga. Oh, does Zach pop out?
I think he went and got his charger, right?
He might have.
Yeah, he might have got his. All right, let me. Zach. You see, Zach is about to give us his insider information. I want to remind everybody: link to below a volcano mining music video about Bitcoin is linked to below. You guys should check it out. Volcano
is that from Roger 3000?
It's real quick. It's a fan of the show. He made a. Yes, it is. Yes,
nice.
It is. He made
love Roger. Check out his Ode to Satoshi as well. That's honestly one of my favorite pieces of Bitcoin.
I've seen this. Art
I've seen. Yeah, you've seen it?
No, I haven't.
All right.
It's like 10 minutes of Pepe the Frog and Wojaks, and it's just the most offensive thing. I love it. It's so good. Everything about it.
As we wait for Zach to return and tell us about Plan B, what the great Bitcoin mechanic, you've made quite an impression today. Do you have plans to be at the Bitcoin conference in Miami in April by any chance? So we can meet in person?
I would love to be there, but I'm not allowed unless I find some way to do something I would be stupid to talk about publicly. I cannot get into America at the moment. They will not let me in. So I'm crying about it. I want to go to Tone's Unconfiscatable conference in Vegas. I want to go to Miami 2022, of course. But what sucks about it is there's no certainty around it. I can't know if I could get into America. I have no idea. So I'm not buying the ticket deliberately, and the price keeps going up. So eventually, if I'm like, oh, great, I'm going to be able to go to Miami 2022, the ticket is now $5,000. So like, I don't know exactly. Maybe I'll get lucky again and get asked to speak. I got to speak at Miami 2021. So Aaron Van Weerdem hooked me up with a ticket, and I gave a talk on user-activated soft forks. But yeah, I just genuinely don't know how I would get into America at the moment. It's great if you're already there and if you're in the right state. It's a very free place. But if you're outside of America, and this goes way back before COVID, like if you wanted to get into America and you're not an American, you got to bend over. Like if you want a green card, you got to have HIV tests. You got to do all these things that are total violations of your right to privacy and self-sovereignty and all that. So it's kind of par for the course, but this just goes too far. I'm hoping this is like the end of the pendulum swing, and now we get to go back the other way. And it's like, wait, we value freedom here, and that's not just Americans, right? If you want to come here, like, we're not going to make people undergo medical procedures they don't want, that don't work, just to come in and attend a Bitcoin conference. That's ridiculous. So until that day, move the conferences to Mexico, and I will attend them gladly with bells on. Or El Salvador.
All right, that is it's unfortunate, this situation, and I mean, you're coming from Canada, but is it because you're not a citizen of Canada though?
I'm a permanent resident, not a citizen. I'm a UK citizen still. So, but I mean, that makes no difference. There is no difference between if you're the only thing you can be to help you if you're not an American with regards to American citizenship and stuff is either you can claim to be like from a country that's openly homophobic and you can say you're gay and persecuted. So I met a lot of Russians in America that had managed to get green cards that way. Or you can be Cuban and make it there somehow. But if you're from just like a normal Western European or North American or Canadian, there's no advantage whatsoever. Like a Canadian can cross into America 6 months and a day later, realize they overstayed their welcome and get banned for life. So it's, even though they're culturally almost identical, like there's just, you have to be very careful. Like you either got to be from,
I don't really swing that way, but if, for 10 Bitcoin, I would marry you if that would.
Oh God! All right.
Yeah, 20 Bitcoins.
Rain check.
You never know what the best guests in the space are going to bring. All right, Zach, are you there? Can you hear us?
Zach is muted.
Yeah, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Zach.
All right, Zach. I wanted to hear your take on Plan B. I mean, you battle with the people that are fans of the Plan B model, and it doesn't seem to be going too well.
I mean, it's going great for me because he said his model would be, he would admit it was invalidated. And then, 2 weeks before he hit that deadline, he started walking it back. I think like he's obviously, a smart dude. I just think he's wrong, and smart people are allowed to be wrong. But I don't like him because he doesn't admit that he's wrong. I also think the model hasn't had a lot of good, effects on discourse around Bitcoin. It's created like an obsession with price and these little sort of red and yellow dots following each other, hitting certain dollar denominated price points. And if that's the most interesting thing to you about Bitcoin, like you're free to focus on that, but I think you're dumb. And I think he's sort of like propagated this all through Bitcoin. Like S2F is like our saving grace, and I think a lot of people have pushed it. I don't want to be too critical, but and like I really don't think about it as much as maybe my tweets would allude to. But I just think it's all really dumb, and I think he's smart, but he's wrong, and he doesn't want to admit it. But yeah,
stock the flow has become a little bit of a mini cult in Bitcoin, and these things. Yeah,
like if you want something that guarantees that the price of Bitcoin is going to go up, you just need to look at inflation. It's going to keep going up because everything is going to keep going up in like dollar denominated value. If you're like in Bitcoin to get like rich, I mean, maybe that isn't like the purest of intentions. I don't know. Like, sure, everyone likes making money. I like when my Bitcoin goes up in value, but it's not, the thing I think about all day, every day and care about the most. I think there's other reasons, more important reasons to be here. And the S2F model, like sort of as big as it's become, just sort of amplifies that, like make money, number go up, which is like a great meme. I love the meme number go up. It's what gets people interested in Bitcoin. The fact that the price goes up and it's volatile and all this stuff. But at some point you're supposed to like move on from that and focus on other things too. And it just reinforces an obsession with price that I don't think is, very helpful in the end, and it's bad. So
we have a lot of reasons to be bullish, right? And why do we need to focus on a model that's not, I don't know, that has flaws? I don't want to go too much down that rabbit hole.
That's a great point. Like there are so many reasons to be bullish. Like if you want the number to go up, you can find a ton of reasons for why it will keep going up, like long term, over a time frame of like a couple of years. But I don't know. I think it's not great. So I'm not a huge fan of it or him.
Zach, tell us about any mining news. You mean you work for a mining company and everything. What's up over there that you think people might want to hear about?
Yeah, I think so. Since you said that, two things I wanted to touch on. I think Brekkie mentioned there's a resurgence and that sort of came over the past year of home mining, or at least just more broadly like retail participation in mining, which is great and definitely true. I think I think it's useful for everyone to have some exposure to mining. Like if you're buying and holding Bitcoin, eventually once you're comfortable with that, the buying and storage process, then like get into mining. Like it's just another level of the same game, in my opinion, of like participating in the Bitcoin ecosystem. And there are lots of people trying to make that as easy as possible. Just like, over the past 5 years, people have tried to make buying and storing Bitcoin as easy as possible. I think you should store Bitcoin a little bit at a time and accumulate hash rate a little bit at a time too. The more it just like decentralizes hash rate, lots of good things come from that. The other thing I was going to comment on in a similar vein was the comment about Marathon buying a ton of machines. And this is probably my least favorite thing about the mining industry, because people love to buy lots of machines, which is very easy to do, and then write a press release about them, which is also very easy to do. But finding space to plug those machines in and actually have them power the network or secure the network and be powered is a much more difficult task. And so, like we know from looking at prior earnings from some of these public companies, that they've sat on 5, 8, 10,000 ASICs at a time, that they've published releases about, say, hey, we have all these ASICs, but they're not running, they're not doing any good. And that's kind of like Marathon's strategy, not to like single them out. I love a bunch of the guys at Marathon. Some of the things they've done in the past before they had leadership changes, not so great. But their strategy is kind of like, let's just hoard ASICs and then we'll put them online like as we can. Different strategies for different companies, but just because someone like buys and announces they bought a ton of machines, it doesn't mean they have all of them at the same time, because they're shipped in phases, and doesn't mean they have anywhere to plug them in necessarily. I think there's a lot of like suit hash rate that keeps coming onto the network, but there's also a lot of like retail pleb hash rate coming on, and I think both of those two growing in tandem are a good balance for the network. We need big, heavily capitalized companies participating in the ecosystem. I think that's great. We also need, lots and lots of thousands, hundreds of thousands of miners with, 1, 5, 10 ASICs also securing the network. I think both dynamics are good. So I'll stop ranting there. But yeah, lots of fun stuff happening in mining. And also, lots of ways to play smoke and mirrors and make things seem a little bit better than they are. So yeah.
Can we take a few shots at Compass?
Sure. Go ahead.
Do you want to start?
You want me to take a shot at Compass?
Well, I don't know. I assumed everyone would have something to I don't know. Like the main thing I have with them is just this notion that you're doing anything in the nature of decentralizing the network, or like by having someone mine on your behalf. Like that's just not a true understanding at all. That's like saying, hey, like have your own Bitcoin, withdraw them from Coinbase, I'll hold them for you. Like then you're doing self-custody. It's like, no, you're not. Like someone else is still in charge of it. Like not your hash rate. You're not furthering the decentralization of anything there. It's like, I'm all for hosted mining if it's like, if someone can go and like get the cheapest electricity in the world and stuff like, but don't pretend it's not like that. It's not what it is, which is like the hash rate's totally not under your control. And it's not even really KYC free Bitcoin either. But so I just find some of those claims a bit disingenuous. And then some of the practices too are like, just don't buy a miner if it's not going to come online for 8 months. Just don't do it. Like the opportunity cost is insane. Like you definitely would be better off just buying Bitcoin. Like, and from what I hear, everyone that does that ends up waiting months and months and months more than they thought they would as well. So I'm really, it's a strategy I'd advise against. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. The first thing I'd say is, the claim about being better off just buying Bitcoin is not really the case. Obviously, because ASICs are positively correlated to the price of Bitcoin. And actually, they appreciate faster than Bitcoin and depreciate slower than Bitcoin when Bitcoin drops. Now, if you're sitting on an ASIC, maybe it isn't mining because there are delays, but that ASIC is still worth, $8,000, $10,000, $15,000, and that price goes up when Bitcoin goes up. Also, the one area where Compass could definitely use improvement is sort of communicating the nature of how the mining industry works to its customers, because delays are part of mining. And so has Compass, in the past, kind of overpromised and underdelivered in certain ways, or maybe could have done a better job setting expectations? I mean, I think that the obvious answer is yes. And it's a brand new company, and they're working out some growing pains. But delays are sort of the status quo for mining. And so the job before Compass is like to onboard a whole group of people who have never had any exposure to mining before into mining and educate them on how the mining market works. You buy Bitcoin on an exchange, it instantly deposits in your wallet. You can withdraw it and do whatever you want. You buy an ASIC on Compass, like there are delays before it starts hashing. Like even if there are no unexpected delays, it won't turn on immediately as soon as you buy the machine. And to your point about custody, yeah, like Compass doesn't pretend that they aren't custodying your machine for you. You have full control over the machine except for SSH access. And if you decide you want to mine at home and not through a hosted facility, then we'll send your machine to you. So there are lots of options. I think Compass is sort of the best option, although definitely not sort of mistake and downside free for mining, especially compared to some of its competitors. But the retail participation in mining takes two forms: one, joining hosted solutions like Compass, or two, mining at home with cool products we've seen introduced over the past year, like the black box from Upstream. Both of those are very valid ways and easy ways for people to get into mining. But if you're, up in the Northeast and anywhere above this Mason-Dixon line in the US, do you want to mine at home and pay 20 cents per kilowatt hour? Or do you want to have someone custody your ASIC and pay 6 cents per kilowatt hour? Like, I mean, I don't think there's a right answer. It's up to you. But the downsides and trade-offs for both options. So you own the ASIC and you can fully control it, paying 20 cents per kilowatt hour at home in certain regions of the US, or you can have someone custody the ASIC for you and have them ship it to you if you want. And while they custody it, pay 6 cents. So really the choice is yours and what you prefer. But Compass and lots of other people also have direct ASIC sales besides their hosted products. And the same thing goes for Bitcoin. There are huge advantages to having very liquid, custodied Bitcoin financial products. But is that as safe and secure as custodying all the Bitcoin yourself in cold storage or other, self-hosted storage products? No. The world's full of trade-offs. And has Compass, done a perfect job serving its customers? No, but it's a brand new company working through growing pains, some of which, are inherent to the mining industry. So, there's mistakes made on both sides, misunderstandings on some sides, but ultimately just comes down to trade-offs for mining specifically. Although I will push back again on the most ill-informed argument in mining is that you're better off just buying Bitcoin than mining, because that's just in no way the case, because the value of your miner is tied to Bitcoin. Once you ROI in 12 to maybe 18, max 24 months on your machine, then it's just free revenue, free Bitcoin coming in there. And in most cases, if you're a small scale miner, whether you're mining at home or through a hosted solution, it's pretty private also. So huge economic advantages from mining. You're definitely better off not just buying Bitcoin. But again, it's up to your preference, whatever.
I agree with you there. In what I want to ask then is why that hasn't always been the case, because I agree with you. I don't like this is something I disagree with Luke Jr. about, that we talk about a bit, which is exactly what you just said. Mining, saying people would be just always better off flat out buying Bitcoin instead of buying a miner, because they'll never be able to buy the amount of Bitcoin they could have bought if they just bought Bitcoin instead of spending 10 grand on an S19 or whatever. I agree. Yeah. The math at the moment does seem to make it it's around 18 months or something for you to ROI. But this wasn't the case, right? Hold on. I've got one of these.
Hey, wait a
right?
second. Wait. Okay. Brekkie's got to say goodbye real quick. So Brekkie, okay. We'll get back to, you'll show that in a second. Brekkie is going to be in Miami at the conference with Swan. What's up with Swan, Brekkie? Say your goodbyes.
Swan's doing great. We'll be at the conference. We got some fun things rolling out soon. We got a new show coming out, a couple new shows. So just be on the lookout for that. And that's all I got. Love being here, Adam. Right, appreciate speaking to you guys, Mechanic and Zack.
Yes.
Good to meet you, man.
All right, take it. Bitcoin Mechanic, you were showing something there. Keep on doing.
So, Zack, do you remember these? I don't know if my camera's even working. I turned it off and can't figure out how to turn it back on.
No, it was
I
on. Now
I
it's
see your
off.
camera. I can't see what you're holding though. Oh yeah, there we go. Yep.
So this, I think it cost me $200, and at the time I bought it in 2012. So, I mean, we're talking like $4 or $5 Bitcoin. So, what are we talking about there? That's about 40 Bitcoin, let's say, I could have bought instead of buying that thing. And it never mined anything like that. Like, it did mine whole Bitcoins, but not much more. Like, and I mean, it certainly wasn't true at the time when I bought that. That argument held up then. If I'd have just bought Bitcoin instead of buying that miner, I would have had a lot more Bitcoin. And to me, that changes as time goes on. It doesn't. Would you say it's become increasingly less true, the argument that you're better off buying Bitcoin instead of a miner? Is that the general trend? Because it certainly wasn't the case once.
Yeah, so I generally only think about when we talk about mining, the post ASIC era of mining. So there was a ton of random hardware in the market, before late 2012, early 2013, which is, from what you said, was probably when you bought that device. Just all sorts of random stuff, and then we actually started getting ASICs introduced in the market, and obviously
this is an ASIC. This thing was the first ASIC.
Right. So that was launched in probably December or November 2012 was when ASICs first were introduced into mining.
Yeah.
Obviously, it can't compete with the hash rate of current ASICs, but the hash rate and the efficiency of ASICs over the past like 5 to 6 years even have had like incremental improvements, but nothing as extraordinary as we've seen from like 2012, 2013 to 2015, 2016. And that's like, there are lots of reasons for that: limitations on how efficient they can make the hardware, just sort of chip manufacturing limitations, all sorts of things. But if you do like basic regression analysis on 4 different types of strategies over multi-year time periods, you'll almost always find that mining and hodling is one of the most profitable strategies, as opposed to mining and selling, mining and mixed selling and hodling, or just buying and hodling. Like on multi-year timeframes with most ASICs, your most profitable strategy is to mine and hold, instead of just buy and hold or mine and sell.
I've never heard that before. That's fascinating. I'm delighted that that's true, because that's what I'm doing at the moment. I mine in my garage with a pretty recent generation of ASIC, and I immerse it so I can clock it up to another 30%. Which is it's great. It's the most fun I've ever had, but I didn't do it expecting to make money off it. And if I'm honest, the amount of like little modifications I've had to do to my house, like put a fan in the garage ceiling, buy copper pipes, buy all the cooling fluid, buy a blowtorch so that I could when you add up all these little expenses, it was something where I'm like, I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing this because this is like the most fun I've ever had. But from what you're saying,
lots of people do it for that reason too, especially the solo miners we were just talking about, where they do it for fun. They do it as a hobby. And once in a while they get lucky. And mining definitely has, pretty steep OpEx, CapEx costs. But all the reasons and modifications and tasks you just described are the key selling point for why lots of miners like hosted solutions like Compass, where they buy an ASIC, they actually own the serial number for a particular machine. They don't have to deal with the noise or the home modifications or pay their residential power prices. They pay cheaper prices to not hear the ASIC and simply receive payouts to their wallet from whatever pool they choose. So again, trade-offs. The data I was citing, my friend Austin, who used to be at Great American Mining, I think he's at Galaxy now. He tweeted about this a year or so ago because he got tired of the misconception also that it's better to just buy Bitcoin than mine and hold Bitcoin. But it's definitely not always the case. And you can certainly be very unprofitable mining Bitcoin. It's not like, free money. And I always caution people who are interested in mining to get into mining slowly, just like you got into buying Bitcoin slowly. Like, average yourself into more hash rate a little bit at a time. Just like, I guess unless some people probably go all in Bitcoin from day one. But slowly buy Bitcoin, slowly accumulate hash rate, and you'll do yourself a good service. You're helping the network. And there are different ways to skin the cat of getting into mining, a lot of them, just like there are multiple ways to buy and multiple ways.
All right. So let's wrap up the show here, because we've gone a little over, but we're pounding that like button. Whoa. Let's Bitcoin. Well, Zach, are you going to be at the Miami Bitcoin conference this year? I got to meet you in person last year. It was awesome. Do you plan to attend again?
Yeah, I'm not sure yet. So probably I'll be there, but I'm not 100% sure yet. I'll keep you updated.
All right. That's good. Anything else you want to add that you were doing down there in Texas? Any events? Anything that got left off you want to mention in your final comments here?
Don't think so. It's the mining capital of the world down here. Not Austin specifically, but Texas. If you're in Bitcoin and ever in Austin, I'm always on Twitter. Just send me a DM. Would love to grab drinks with anybody watching. I love meeting new Bitcoiners in Austin. It's a great city to be in Bitcoin generally, but great state for mining as well.
Well, speaking of the great state of Texas, I will be in Midland, Texas next week. So I've never been there before. I'm curious. So I will be in Texas for a little while very soon. I was in Dallas recently. It's quite a great state. Florida and Texas, who knows which one's number one, number two. I'm not going to get into all that. All right. Now, north of the border, we got the Bitcoin mechanic. Anything you want to add that was left out today? Any conclusionary remarks? You've made a great debut on the show.
Thanks for having me, man. I really enjoyed it. Please check out, I just commented in the chat. Please check out my YouTube channel. It would be a big help to me if I could get 1,000 subs. I'm not far off. At the moment, I run my channel is under some attack from some copyright trolls. It's not legitimate, but when you don't have 1,000 subs, YouTube will just close your account and you don't have any recourse. So once I get 1,000, I can start doing what I want to do with my channel again. Secondly, please check out Start9, where I work. We run a node project, but so much more than that. It's a very reliable premium product. It's not like the free versions you get, like Umbrella and things like that. It's a paid product. As a result, it's far more reliable as premium support. It's the best way to run Bitcoin Core Lightning nodes reliably, unless you're really know what you're doing and you're able to get something like that up and running reliably yourself. It's a personal server rather than a personal computer, and as a result, it needs to be rock solid. So run a Mastodon instance, get away from Twitter if you want. Run file browser, get away from iCloud or Microsoft's whatever their cloud thing is. Run Matrix, get away from Telegram and Signal. Self-host all your digital services. Become an adult in the digital realm. It's one of the greatest things I've ever been a part of, is working on this. It's called the Embassy. It's called Embassy OS. It runs on a Raspberry Pi, but we've just made it hardware agnostic now as well, due to a recent Raspberry Pi shortage. So it's a really exciting project. Start9.com. Please go check it out. I do a demonstration of what it can do as well at Tone Vay's conference, Understanding Bitcoin in Dubai. You can go and check out the video for that on his channel. The demo I run through is I show File Browser, which is a way of self-hosting your own cloud storage, but it integrates with Pages, Embassy Pages, which lets you spin up a Tor hidden service website instantly, and you can host any data that's in your cloud, and it all integrates seamlessly. And it's literally just a few clicks of buttons to have an uncensorable, untrackable website that cannot be taken down or cannot be modified, and no one can even know who's hosting it, literally with a few clicks of a button, and it's rock solid. So things like that are superpowers. I encourage anyone to come and look at it. It's a super enthusiastic community. Just come in and find out what it's all about. On Telegram if you want, Start9 Telegram. And of course, we host our own Matrix instance as well. So much better is to come in and talk to us in our self-hosted chat rather than a hosted platform like Telegram or Signal, which is not really a solution. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Very good. Best freaking guest in the space every Friday. It was freaking hardcore today. And so I'm just reminding everybody, April 6th to 9th in Miami. It's coming up soon. Use the Adam10 discount code. It's linked to below. Click on it. All three of these guests are linked to below on their Twitter. Follow them. Go to their various media places. They're all over. They're doing their thing. They are in motion. I love it. Shabbat shalom, everybody. I'm Adam Meister, BitcoinMeister. This is Meister. Subscribe to the channel. Follow me on Twitter at TechBalt, TECHBALT. Have a great weekend. We'll be around next week. And thanks a lot, guest. You were awesome. See you later. Bye-bye, everybody. All right.
Peace.
Ended it there.